Edge-turned applique with Pride Joy Quilting. The first step is to print out and cut out your templates. This pattern is unique because these 1/4-inch seam allowances will get sewn in with other units, whereas these corners are part of the applique. So we will be edge turning both corners and leaving the 1/4-inch seam allowances that will be sewn into other units intact. For this technique, we will be using Reynolds freezer paper. I start by rough cutting around the template, and I like to use 2 layers of freezer paper in order for my template to be nice and sturdy. Freezer paper has 2 sides, a shiny side and a matte side. What the shiny side does is it allows for the paper to be somewhat tacky but non-permanent. I will iron both templates onto themselves on a non-stick surface like this oven lining. Then I take some washable school glue and adhere the template to the matte side of the freezer paper. Now it's time to cut the template. Leaving the 1/4-inch seam allowances intact, I will cut the edge-turned applique edges right on the seam line. Now it's time to add the fabric. Taking the shiny part of the template, which is the bottom part, I will place it along the wrong or back side of the fabric. I like to flip it over so that I can iron with the fabric on top. Now that the freezer paper has stuck to my fabric, I'm ready to cut. It's important to remember that I need to cut 1/4 inch away from the edges that I'm going to turn. And this is how it looks. You can see that the 1/4-inch seam allowance is intact because of the paper, and because I have cut a 1/4-inch seam allowance around the edge turn corners, it is now ready to be turned. Taking some starch and water that I have placed in a small jar, I will take a paintbrush, lightly wet it, and then dab the fabric 1/4-inch seam allowances that I will be turning with my iron. It's important to take your time on this step. The starch and water mixture work as a small glue in order for the edges to stay in place. By taking tweezers and a small iron, you now slowly, without burning yourself, iron the edges into place. And this is our template. You can see that the edges are crisp and turned so that the edges are not raw. The edges that are left without being turned will be stitched into other units. Setting the applique unit aside, it's now time to tackle the background unit. Using the specifications on the unit itself, we're going to cut around the unit as stated on the template. A light box may be helpful here because we are going to be turning our background unit over so that we can apply our applique piece to the top of it or the back side of it, which ends up being the front of the unit. A light box can help see exactly where we need to place our applique unit. Now we want to make sure that our template stays where we want it to be. Some washable glue can really come in handy here, simply by placing some dots along the 1/4-inch seam allowance. I also like to put glue in this oil bottle, allowing me to be very precise as to where the glue goes. But my favorite is probably using fusible webbing. I will take my freezer paper template and I will cut out the shape of the applique unit, and I will cut the webbing scant smaller to the actual shape. That way the fusible webbing isn't poking out larger than the actual applique shape. I also like this method because then the entire applique shape stays intact and adhered to the background fabric. Making sure that the fusible webbing gets ironed on to my template, I will wait till it cools and then I will remove the paper, leaving just the glue onto the fabric, essentially making my entire applique piece like a sticker. Now we are ready to assemble. Turning over my background piece, I will position my applique unit where it needs to be, and I will iron the entire applique unit onto the background piece. Once the unit is cooled, we are now ready to stitch in place this edge-turned applique unit. Now at your sewing machine, you're going to want to take your stitch up to a 1.9, a 2.0, and using whatever thread you like. My preference is 80 weight poly thread or Decobob by Wonderfil, and you're going to stitch about 1/16 away from the edge of the applique unit. This will make sure that the unit adheres to the background fabric, and it will be ready to be sewn to other units in the pattern. This has been a tutorial for the pattern Paris Je t'aime, available at prideandjoyquilting.com. Thank you so much, and please consider following or subscribing.